Good evening, everyone. It is now 5:15. And with that, I will call to order this work session for July 9th, 2025 of Boise, Idaho Design Review Commission. Christine, would you please call the roll?
Temple. Marsh. Aguilar.
Here.
Erstad.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Kesrick.
Here.
4 present, 2 absent.
Thank you. Josh, would you like to run through a quick agenda on this, or should we dive into the first 2 items? All right. I am going to be recusing myself from item 1. But not from item 2. Okay. If you'd like a rationale on that, I'd be willing to give it or not. But I guess the question I have is, do I need to conduct calling applicants up if I'm recusing from item 1? Or? Do I get to anoint them? Let the record show that Commissioner Semple has just arrived. He and Commissioner Aguilar can duke it out for seniority.
I'll need some guidance from you, Josh, but I'll, I guess, lead the work session. Do you want to give or can we get a recap of the project and what we're tasked with today?
Yep. All right. Good evening, commissioners. So we have 2 related work session items this evening. We're going to hear them one at a time. So the first one is DRH 25-00081 at 3150 West Main Street. This is the project parcel. But for this item, we are just looking at the CWI building highlighted there. As you might recall, on May 14th, 2025, the Design Review Commission had a hearing on this project, and they approved the project with an added condition to return to a future public work session to review a revised canopy proposal. So we have the applicant's revised proposal. They added additional canopies, and the canopies are longer. Previously, they were only over the doors. So this is a view from the north east from the plaza with the original and the revised. This is a view from Main Street near the corner of Whitewater. And you can see the applicant has wrapped the canopies around the corner. So here's a closer perspective. It looks like they're approximately 5-foot deep canopies. And the applicant also added sunshades along the western building facade along Main Street. So the original without those, and then revised with the sun screens there. So if the commission would like to approve the project with the new design, we do have a recommended motion that includes the previous approval conditions and findings. And with that, we can turn it over to the applicant to give their presentation.
Thank you, Caitlin. Is the applicant present? Would you like to come up and speak to the commission?
My name is Robert Busan, 205 North 10th Street, Boise, Idaho 83702. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to discuss the modifications we've made to the CWI Boise campus building.
Can everyone hear him okay? It sounds like the speaker is like barely working. Or maybe just speak a little closer to it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
At our last hearing, it was determined that the building needed more substantial canopies. Since then, we have increased the covered pedestrian area of street-facing facades, or covered area of street-facing facades by more than 5 times as compared to the previous submittal. To the west of the primary Main Street building entrance along Wider Park Boulevard, we have increased the width of the building mounted canopies over entrances, now stretching the full width between brick pilasters. At the corner of Whitewater and Main, we have included additional canopies outside of the building entrances that wrap the corner, enhancing the pedestrian experience along this high visibility street corner. Here you can see that. And then a little bit closer, as Caitlin pointed out, more pedestrian experience here. And then working around to the plaza side, so we have Whitewater at our back here, you can see that similar treatment wrapping the corners. Additionally, to the west of the primary Main Street entrance, we've incorporated projecting sunshade louvers. These elements add texture, shadow, and depth to the facade, enhancing visual interest at the pedestrian scale and contributing to a more dynamic and engaging streetscape. As discussed, we've greatly increased the canopies and feel that the modified design will lead to an improved pedestrian experience. Thank you, and I can stand for questions.
Madam Chair, there is no one online.
So we'll close the hearing and provide a decision. May I have a motion, or is there any discussion prior to the motion?
Madam Chair, Caitlin, can you bring up the proposed motion? There you go. Thanks. Madam Chair, I'd be prepared to make a motion. I'd move to approve DRH 25-00081 per the findings and conditions contained in the May 16th, 2025 action letter, except as modified by the updated submittal documents dated June 3rd, 2025 and the July 9th, 2025 work session discussion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Can we? It's been moved and seconded that we approve this application. Can we have a roll call, please?
Simple,
Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Gesrick,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Now we'll hear the second item, DRH 24-00031. Public work session to satisfy conditions of approval for the construction of a mixed-use development with retail, education, residential, and hospitality uses on the property in an MX5 mixed-use downtown zone. Caitlin, can you provide some background?
Thank you, commissioners. So next we'll jump into this DRH 2531. So same subject parcel at 3150 Main. So on March 24th, or March 13th, 2024, the Design Review Commission heard this application and conditionally approved it with a list of items for the applicant to bring back to a future work session. So the items that we requested included additional phasing details, circulation updates, landscape updates, more information about the pedestrian spaces and greenbelt interface, preliminary grading and drainage, bicycle plans, the area for the public use easement, a solid waste plan, updated designs for the streetscape, bus stop and bike lanes complying with the City of Boise ACHD and Valley Regional Transit requirements, and preliminary site lighting information. So the applicant has made some minor changes to the site layout since the previous hearing. The configuration of the hotel building at the northwest corner has changed, removing the turnaround, and a wellness building is now proposed south of the hotel building. As detailed in the work session memo, there are several items that we don't believe the applicant has adequately addressed in order to obtain construction permits, but that they could continue to work on to finalize with staff. So we have included a number of recommended conditions to address those. And I'd like to run through the conditions. We really feel that each of these conditions are crucial to a successful project, and we would only be comfortable with approval With these conditions in place, and any additional conditions the commission would like to add. But if the applicant is interested in removing conditions, we would suggest deferring the project so that the applicant can provide us more information to support their requests, and for additional staff analysis. So our recommended conditions on this first slide, A through C, these are carried over from the original action approval letter. So these were conditions that were on that original approval letter. The first is to comply with the floodplain and river system approvals. The only new portion is underlined there, and that's just to address any additional approval needed because of the design changes. Condition B talks about vegetating any areas of the site that will be disturbed but won't have active construction on them. Condition C is to provide an enhanced pedestrian crossing at Whitewater Park at the northeast of the site. So this aligns with the pathway along the north of the property, and it provides a connection from the pathway to the adjacent school across Whitewater Park. Early on, city staff indicated to the applicant a need to provide this, and it's a condition of that original approval. We did receive a staff report from ACHD, and that didn't indicate any opposition, but it did have some additional requirements. If the applicant can obtain something in writing from ACHD saying that they are not prohibiting the enhanced crossing, that condition already allows that. So we would not recommend any changes to that condition. And then condition D is just to provide a sign plan for the overall site. And then starting with condition E, these are all new conditions to address kind of gaps that we saw, and that we feel we need additional information on before we would issue any construction permits. So we still need a more detailed phasing plan. We need planting plans. We need to see the removal of the pear trees, removal of the artificial turf along the green belt. We need details for the hardscape surfaces and the outdoor furnishings. We're still recommending a more direct path from the public sidewalk at the intersection into the site. The current design still looks like it makes it hard for pedestrians to interact with that corner at the intersection. So we're looking for an unobstructed direct path either to the building or to the plaza. Primary internal sidewalks located behind the street trees and the landscaping to the maximum extent feasible. So rather than having the sidewalks adjacent to where the cars are, we want the landscape buffer between those internal to the site. A couple of minor changes to the public use easement area. And then working with staff on the bicycle parking. We have a couple uses that don't indicate the exact parking required, so they'll need to work with staff to figure out the final bike parking requirements and make sure they have the space required for those. And then of course they'll need grading and drainage to comply with public works requirements. They still need to work out the final solid waste plan and narrative. Prior to issuance of construction permits, we need the streetscapes, the final design of those. We have the designated streetscape types in the streetscape standards. If they want to make any alterations from the streetscape standards, we need to see those exact dimensions and what those are. Some of their drawings are still showing different streetscape designs, so we need to see exactly what that proposal is, and then if there's any changes from what our standards say, we want to run those by Ada County Highway District and VRT and CCDC to make sure that everyone's in agreement. And then we had the VRT bus stop on Main Street. We have received some additional comments from ACHD and VRT about what that needs to look like. The drawings currently are not showing compliance with all the requirements from Valley Regional Transit in the Ada County Highway District, so we would like to work on that. And then if they are providing on-street parking areas and loading areas internal, they also need accessible parking and loading areas. And then just final lighting plans. So if we are sticking with the recommended conditions, we are comfortable recommending approval per those findings. If the applicant would like to revise the recommended conditions, we would recommend deferring the project so that we can collect more information and provide more analysis. And with that, I can answer any questions or we can have the applicant present.
Caitlin, for the sign plan, condition D, what, can you kind of walk me through the code as the city sees it? Is this under the current code or is this under the legacy code?
This is current code.
Okay. How does this operate? Is this like a subdivision or what's going on with this master plan? Is this a single lot? Or is this like a shopping center? What's the classification there and how does that relate to the signage plan?
So the development as it currently is doesn't include a subdivision, so everything is on one lot. So we would just call it a mixed use development because there are multiple tenants and multiple buildings. The sign plan allows us to ensure that we don't have like a mix of a bunch of different sign designs that are just clashing or people are arguing over signage. So once we have the applicant provide us with a plan for the overall site, it makes it much easier for us to review the future signage requests in accordance with that plan.
So is there any contemplation within that of like, shopping center pylon sign, or is that something that's even allowed within the Boise signage code?
Yeah, I don't believe a pylon sign is allowed in this zone. They would probably have like one shared sign typically. That's like one more visible sign. That's how we would usually require that they have like one kind of center sign for the overall development. That's usually a little larger, and then we'll limit the size of additional signage so that it's not cluttered and there's not a bunch of large signs on the site.
Thank you. Any other commissioner questions? Would the applicant like to present?
Good evening, President, members of the commission. My name is Ryan Cutler. I work for Alquist Development, and I'm representing not only Alquist Development, who's a partner in this project, but also CWI and and the site that is we're reviewing this evening. I know Caitlin gave us a great background, and we've been here before a year ago, kind of working on this project, and we've taken our time to work through a lot of these conditions that were placed in that approval. And we really appreciate staff and their willingness to work with us as we've kind of gone through a little bit of revision on this site to make sure it's matching what's needed there. But we are certainly excited, obviously partnering with CWI and the opportunity they have down in this portion of the extended downtown to be able to work on a site that I think we can all agree has needed this for a while. Has kind of been an eyesore to the community as just kind of a sea of pavement out there along the river. It's needed some improvements for a while, and we're grateful for the opportunity to work together on this. Rob was earlier here talking about the building. Obviously, he's working with us as part of our. A team on this. We do have Michael O'Reilly from Kimley Horn here this evening, who can answer any technical questions from a civil engineer standpoint if needed, and just the other members of our team that are listed here. It's been awesome collaborating with this group. I know Caitlin mentioned just a minute ago that they would be willing to move forward with approval on this if we were okay with all the conditions. I am here letting you know that we do want to discuss a few of those conditions. I am confident, however, in the information that I'm going to provide you, that it would still allow us to move forward with an approval based on the information that I'm giving to you. And we feel confident that with the help of staff and what they've already provided as far as conditions, which we agree with, aside from the ones that we'd like to discuss, which are C, H, and N. We'd love to discuss that with tonight, that we can move forward with an approval as we are eager to get started on this site and the CWI building as you just recently approved prior to this. Condition C, and as indicated by staff, there's a desire to have a pet crossing located near the access to the Greenbelt along Whitewater Park Boulevard, unless discussed differently with ACHD. We have had long discussions with ACHD about this crossing location, if it was needed or warranted, or if they would approve something there. I've included an email from Mindy Wallace, who is a part of the ACHD planning staff there. And as we've kind of gone back and forth, and I'll show you here in a moment some of the exhibits that we've provided to them, they've indicated, as highlighted in the yellow, ACHD would recommend no enhanced crossing at the proposed location at Whitewater Park Boulevard and Idaho. And I will kind of proceed to show you why that is. We are all for pedestrian safety, and we think it's great. And I think that's why Whitewater Park Boulevard already has all of these crossings that are green stars. So the yellow star is the location that's indicated in the staff report as a potential crossing. And as we worked back and forth with ACHD on this, there was considerations of existing crossings, whether it be up at the park, at the apartment location, or at Main Street and Whitewater Park Boulevard, or even Fairview and Whitewater Park Boulevard. You can see there are a tremendous amount of opportunities to cross this street in this location. The concern also from ACHD was how much we're stopping traffic on Whitewater Park Boulevard based on the distances from each other. Again, and maybe I'll point out on this, that between the existing crossings, which are green stars, and the yellow star, ranges from 2 minutes to a 3 minutes difference of walking between those locations. So we're not talking about a tremendous distance that you're going to have to walk to get to another pedestrian crossing. They already exist. This is the exhibit that we gave to ACHD to highlight our concerns with putting another crossing in at this location. If you're coming from the north, there is an opportunity 577 feet away from the green belt that allows you to cross and come to this location to attach to the connect with the green belt. Likewise, if you're coming from the other direction, you have that opportunity at Main Street, where there's already a crossing that's going to lead to the entrance of the new CWI building. And so their concern in that situation was that the distance between those is not very great. And that's why we received the email from them saying there's not a recommendation from them that we have to put a crossing at that location based on the number of crossings that already exist. And so that would be our recommendation at this point in time. Again, based on the number of crossings that already exist in the location, someone could safely cross Whitewater Park Boulevard in a numerous amount of locations to get to a certain part of the west side of Whitewater Park Boulevard currently. And we feel like there is really no need to add an additional crossing at that location. And obviously I can stand for any questions on that later when we get to that point. Excuse me. And so this is part of that condition that we're discussing there, that would be modified as such. I'm going to move on to the next portion of that. So this was discussed earlier as far as having a more direct connection to the front portion of the CWI building. We've worked a lot with the architect team to make the front of that building accessible, beautify it so it looks good from the street as you come around Whitewater to Main Street, and what that building will look like, and have it be a really great and grand entrance for those coming into the building from that corner. So this is part of our site plan, talking about that entrance. You'll see obviously Whitewater Park on the right side of the picture, and then to the bottom is Main Street. There was some discussion about direct access and connection to that corner, and I think it goes both ways, and that's part of the reason we want to discuss this tonight. And this is one of the ones that we can also, when you have questions later, we can discuss. We've provided not only direct access, if you look at the top of that picture, direct access to the plaza that goes behind the CWI building and a future building that connects into the entrance as well. Down at the corner, we've provided access to the front of the building where there is doorways and entrances that will be on that building and have direct access to that. And again, along Main Street, the ability to come into the front of the building there at the corner. Part of the reason why the landscaping looks like it does is also to allow for people that are not going into the entrance of that building to circumvent that and come around the corner. There is a heavy amount of traffic that comes around that corner. Our fear in our design of this site was that there would be a lot of cutting across that corner if we left it completely open, and that would be some conflict and interaction with people that are trying to enter into the school building there. So we have a little bit of separation with sidewalk connectivity to the front of the building to allow people to pass by the location if they're not going there, or to access easily, whether it be from ADA compliance or just anyone coming into the building, have a little bit of separation there to allow for a little bit of extra safety there. Again, direct connectivity to the plaza, which leads to the entire site, direct connectivity to the front of the building on the corner there where there's doorways that access the building. And then as you go along Main Street, wherever there are doorways, we've provided access into the building there as well. So it's just a discussion that we'd like to have. We are open to suggestions of modification there, but wanted to help you understand the reasoning why we designed the site to look the way it does for that corner that could be heavily traversed. And then part of that condition also was a direct connection. If you can imagine here, so off the screen to the right is the plaza that we discussed that goes between the CWI building. It connects directly across with a crosswalk to the front of a future parking structure where there is direct connection to a sidewalk, which then leads to another crosswalk that leads directly out to the Greenbelt. So we've tried our best to provide a great corridor from that plaza straight into the future retail area with connectivity via sidewalk that gets you all the way out to the Greenbelt. So you could connect on the Greenbelt pathway to the very north of the project. You could connect through on the connected sidewalks in between, or you could go down to Main Street and walk on the provided sidewalk that's in front of it. So there's lots of opportunity for connectivity there with direct pathway to unobstructed pathway to each location. The final condition that we want to talk about is N. And more specifically, the bottom portion of N, where it talks about any proposal to modify the streetscape design will require Boise City approval in coordination with ACHD, BRT, and CCDC. Sorry, a lot of letters there. We agree. I think this has kind of been a hot button topic, and mostly because Main Street has kind of gone through a little bit of a transformation of what it looks like over time as you come from downtown leading to the freeway or going up Fairview or heading into Garden City, which is kind of a transition area right there. This is one of the items that was discussed. Originally, our site plan had an 8-foot buffer area. We are happy to adjust that to 10 feet. We've evaluated that. It works within our footprint. We can do that to have that 10-foot adjustment or 2-foot adjustment there. This is one of the ones that we do want to discuss. One of the requirements within the design guide and with staff was moving the requested bike lane to the sidewalk side of the landscape buffer. And we've kind of gone back and forth with that, and our design team has evaluated it. And the reason why we show it on our plan as we do now is because it matches exactly what is going on within 1 and 2 blocks directly adjacent to this site. I think you're probably familiar with this location as you go down Main Street. So in those areas where they do have VRT bus stops, a bike lane, a buffer, and then the sidewalk, that's how it is configured right now. If you look at the new St. Luke's building that's down there, which was recently built, that's the approval that went through for how that area should look. And so in our proposal, we matched that where we have the bus stop, the bike lane, the buffer area, and then the sidewalk for continuity down Main Street. That varies a little bit from obviously what was requested by staff. But again, as we look through it in these areas, we wanted to find that continuity so that when you're a pedestrian or somebody trying to get on the bus or somebody riding their bike, that as you go down the road, it's the same. We were trying to avoid any crossover, any other conflict with vehicles because bikes are going from out more towards the roadway to behind the buffer and then moving back and forth, which oftentimes can be really confusing to somebody that's trying to make their way down Main Street. So from if you can imagine in front of this site now, as similar to down in front of the St. Luke's building and further down Main Street. Our proposal is that there is a bus stop, the bike lane that's behind the bus stop, then the buffer area with the landscape in it, and then a sidewalk. And as you transition along the front of our site, that's when you head towards the bridge that goes across the river at Main Street. Our current bike lane, where it is in its situation, actually gets you further away from traffic than it is currently right now. There will be delineation along the way to have separation between there, and it lines up directly with the separating barriers that are currently on the bridge. If you can picture that, currently on the bridge, there's concrete separators that go all the way across it. Our bike lane in this configuration lines up directly with the bike lane that is existing on the bridge, again, for limited confusion on where you should be riding your bike. And then the sidewalk lines up with what is existing for the sidewalk that goes across the bridge. So we appreciate, and I appreciate all the hard work that Caitlin's been doing on this and working with us on this. Why we did it the way we did was just to match up with what already exists on Main Street from a standpoint of we want the pedestrians to feel safe and have a good feeling of, well, I just came from down Main Street where it looked like this. We want to maintain that it goes through as opposed to make an adjustment there where somebody would have to cross over and have conflict with potentially a car at the intersection. If you look at the access point here where you turn into the side at Main Street, if you were to put the bicyclist behind the trees, as was indicated, that's challenging for a car to turn into this development and potentially have somebody on their bike that's hidden behind landscaping along the trees. So this allows for that to have better car bike interaction from a safety standpoint as we've evaluated what that looks like. So just a little deviation, I guess, from condition N. Again, we agree with all the other conditions that have been listed on there. We've been working on those, working hard with staff to make that happen. But just a quick modification again on C, H, and N. Maybe, Mr. President, to answer your question on the signing perspective, yes, Caitlin was right. This is one giant parcel that has multiple uses on it, but the signing plan will be matching from any sort of monument sign that would go at the entrance to the development to the types of signage that's put on each individual building. So they have cohesion and are matching, and that's something that we would have to work through the city with to make sure that that's all approved to them. So it is always has and always will be in our plan to work through a signage plan with the city once we get to that next step. Again, as I stated before, we agree with the conditions outside of the ones that I've listed where we'd like to have a discussion about, and I've indicated based on our exhibits tonight that we'd like to discuss. We agree with those conditions and are grateful for the opportunity we've had to work with staff and with this commission to get to this point. We are very excited about moving forward with this development. We're excited for CWI and their ability to expand in this area and bring opportunity for education in the Boise area for those that would like to stay home a little closer to get their education. And we are grateful to discuss, and I'd stand for any questions at this time if you had any.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Simple.
So just so I'm clear on condition C regarding the crossing, effectively what you're saying is ACHD's told you that they're not recommending a crossing. So effectively you've fulfilled that condition of approval by getting there. So, and maybe I can ask staff about this too, but maybe it's just a removal of the condition C.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, from our interpretation of ACHD's response, they requested additional information.
Okay.
So I think with our condition as it's written, it still allows that if they can get something that says ACHD is prohibiting this enhanced crossing, they can still move forward without the crossing. But if they are not able to provide something from ACHD that says this is prohibited, then we would like them to proceed with the crossing.
So you, Mr. Chair, follow up.
Mr. Simple.
So you want something that's more definitive, not they wouldn't recommend it, they're not allowing it whatsoever. Okay,
That's correct.
thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Aguilar.
Caitlin, can you define enhanced crossing, just for clarity and for everyone in the room?
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I believe the crossing that ACHD had originally thought was acceptable was an RFB. So that's just like the flashing light to cross. So it's a little bit more visible than just having, 'cause obviously we wouldn't want a crosswalk with nothing to indicate to drivers that they need to look for pedestrians. So it's just like a little bit more of an enhanced visible crosswalk with a flashing light.
Thank you.
Yeah, rectangular flashing beacon is what they're referring to there. And I think, Mr. President and Commission, I think we can continue obviously to work with ACHD. And if there's more specific language, if we specifically have to have something that says the word prohibited in it, I just want to make sure what our opportunity is to discuss that with them, because, you know, it's up to me now to go back to them and say, hey, if it's not needed there, I need you to write me something that says prohibited. And I just want to make sure that that is what my responsibility is. Just checking with, is that how we're reading that? If this condition stays in, that allows us to continue to work with them. And then if they need us to gather any additional data or not, if it's not, I need to provide to this commission or to staff something that says that that is specifically prohibited.
I think
Is that
that's
the wording that I need?
Yeah.
Okay. We would be okay with that staying in as a condition if we can move forward knowing that we're allowed to continue to work with ACHD on this and not and our proposal also with that on would be that we could provide that to staff and not have to come back and show you the email that we received to delay our process.
Any other questions? Thank you.
You bet.
I think we will. Anyone here to testify from the public on this item? Any online? No? Okay. Then we will close the public portion of this hearing. Keeping an eye on the clock. Is there any discussion among the commission?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Simple.
I mean, based on staff's recommendation, with the additional conditions, I mean, it feels like there's a little bit of open-endedness there where the applicant can work with staff to kind of fulfill them. I understand the streetscape concerns along Main Street there. I think the condition as written is that they just continue to work with ACHD and the city, which I'm fine with. The only other one is that corner entry. I think that the explanation and some of the exhibits provide a little bit more context there. I think understanding that there's another entry just north of that one right at the corner, and that corner is kind of an active or maybe / passive seating area outside that space. It feels like they've addressed it. I mean, I get it. I wouldn't want to be sitting right at that corner with a car coming right by me either. I still have a little bit of a concern about there's a really narrow spot right there where that patio gets real close to the sidewalk. If there's not something there, people will walk through your landscape. So just putting that out there.
Okay. I think the discussion of the crosswalk, it's not a condition that I would remove at this point. I think the idea that there are enough crossing locations on Whitewater is erroneous. Our city blocks are 300 feet long. Add a little bit for additional public sidewalks, but that particular indicated crossing is 372 feet from the next one, and then another 500 and some odd feet from the one after that. So until ACHD flat out says they will not allow it, I would think that's actually important to keep in there. As far as the bike lane goes, I agree with your assessment, Mr. Simple, that it really is up to ACHD, the city, CCDC as well, who kind of spearheaded those earlier improvements. So I think that should also stay in as well. Condition H, I agree. Yeah, it's kind of at your own risk, keep that as landscaping. I think it's interesting that the applicant is trying to kind of remove the plaza nature of that space and separate it from the right of way more. It seems to really neck down some of that space, and it could be a nice asset. I think the landscape, the master plan for this in general is not very good at interacting with the public realm. I don't think it makes a lot of very good public spaces or even plaza spaces within it, especially when compared to the original proposal that was put in place for the site that had a really incredible plaza space that came off of the green belt and had some really interesting architecture around it. This looks like a very suburban development, and it's nothing at all like what some of us started to hope for here. I think that we need to make a motion on this. The direction from staff was that if there were items that needed further discussion, this was a deferral, or could you clarify that for us, Caitlin?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, with the recommended conditions as they are, we're comfortable with approval with those conditions. If we need more discussion on any of those conditions or we're removing requirements, especially ones that have to do with like the right of way and other agencies, then we would recommend deferring.
So because there are conditions involving more discussion, this should be a deferred item. That unless someone were to make a motion that a majority here agreed with, saying that those conditions could be removed.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I think like if the condition about the corner was the only one that we were okay with, we're fine moving forward with removing that condition. It goes H. But the other conditions, I would say we would like to retain. If you have additional requirements, we're happy to add additional requirements. I think we were just worried about taking away any of the recommended conditions.
Mr. Chair, do you,
Mr. Simp.
and maybe for the rest of the commissioners, my commissioners as well. It feels like, so if H is kind of, you feel like maybe they've complied or they're giving a reason that makes sense within code. The other two conditions are work with ACHD, work with VRT, ACHD, and the city staff. Feels like there's already protection moving forward, as long as we don't remove those. And so maybe just removing condition H, and then we could approve, and then the applicant can continue to work with staff and the various other agencies to resolve those other two conditions, because the rest of the conditions they've indicated they agree with.
Mr. Chair, can we see the list of conditions again? Can we see the next set of those? There we go.
Caitlin, given the amount of conditions in here that require modification and design revision, it would make sense to me to hear this again, either at a second work session or another public hearing. Is this, Josh, would you maybe weigh in on the mechanism there?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, that would be at your discretion. If you feel that and this is a substantial list of conditions. If you feel like that is beyond what you are comfortable with staff reviewing, outside of the public hearing process, you could certainly set this over to another work session to actually see these conditions implemented. And then we could really shrink that list.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Aguilar.
I would feel more comfortable if the applicant were to come back and present some more details, the ones that are requested. And I feel like there's some more design work that needs to happen here. And I would feel more comfortable if it came back to the commission. I feel I completely trust staff, but if if they don't reach an accord on everything, seems like it's just going to get drug out even more. And maybe this will incentivize everyone to, if we bring it back one more time and we can resolve all the issues, and then the applicant can move forward.
Do you want to take a stab at a motion then?
I guess I have a question as to what would be in the best interest of, I guess, everyone, if it's better to defer or to just specifically have them come back to a separate work session. I mean, in terms of the motion.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Aguilar, it's simpler to defer to a date specific because then we don't have to go through all the noticing again. So if you set this out to next month and the applicant indicated they were comfortable with that with maybe a nod of the head, we could just set this to next month's hearing and move forward with that.
And the applicant would not have to, we don't have to post or.
Don't have to post the site, don't have to do the mailings again. We would just place it on next month's agenda because it's date specific.
Do we have the date for that?
August 13th.
Mr. Chair, is the applicant comfortable with the meeting the August 13th date? Does that give you enough time to, I guess, kind of tidy up this package and bring it back?
We would accept that. We'll take the earliest one possible.
Thank
Our
you.
preference obviously would be that we move forward with the initial motion that was moving because we're working with staff and doing that now. But if this body decides to defer that, we would like the soonest one possible as help us not miss our construction window.
Mr. Chair, I would think if we defer to August 13th, that'd give you time to revisit with staff, ACHD, and any other parties to kind of tie up these loose ends, and then hopefully come back and say, yep, we got all these items resolved and here it is, and we can approve it then.
Sure. I guess the question, if I may, Mr. President and Commissioners, is how the conditions are set up now. Doesn't that wording of that allow us to do that currently based on an approval of those conditions?
I believe that an approval here would allow for revision to all of the things that are requested here. I think it's a matter of this commission's comfort with the solutions being arrived at being something that fits within the design review ethos. And I think with a project of this magnitude and scale, it's important that if this commission thinks that there's still an approval component that would benefit the city for us to take on, then we should see it again.
Mr. Chair, so I think if I understand your question correctly, if we defer this, I think technically the applicant is not obligated to the new conditions because we're going to defer it. The applicant's been made aware of the ideal new conditions and that there he has time to resolve them. And then potentially with staff's review at the next meeting, they might be less conditions, completely different ones, hopefully none. Does that make sense? Is that correct?
We're getting a nod.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, yes, absolutely. So for instance, a condition is to provide details of all hardscape materials and furnishings. If they provide that at the work session, that condition can be struck and we can, you know, et cetera, and kind of pare this list down.
So does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
I obviously recognize it's not my decision. I'm just, you know, it's my responsibility on this side of the
course.
table to push for my client to be able to work through whatever we can. You know, I feel like we've sufficiently and continuously been working with staff and with ACHD and VRT and CCDC, which we would continue to do anyways. So I'm just, my concern on this side is that we just keep kicking this down the road and we defer and we defer and we defer as we continue to work with them as we would be anyways. That's just my concern. I recognize that if we move forward and some of those conditions could be struck from that as we move forward, they also could be struck from that as we continue to work with those agencies ongoing. So there's that side of it as well. You know,
I appreciate the urgency. I think
Sure.
that to put words in my fellow commissioners' mouths, I think something in which we're essentially approving a landscape plan for 5 separate projects at one time, it's just not going to move as quickly.
and we recognize too, as part of our, every time we come in with a different building, there's going to be a landscape plan associated with that. And we recognize that as we work on those individual buildings, they all just tie into a greater parcel that is this overall site. And so it's a challenging thing. We recognize that. We recognize there's going to be bumps in the road as we've worked on this over the last year to get it to this point. We've been working through some of that. So I recognize your concern on that. And again, we're going to come in with 3 more buildings on this site. They're going to have landscape plans that tie into what's existing here. It's not always going to be perfect as we work through that. It's a challenging thing as we work with different clients. But I guess, again, from our perspective, we're showing a good faith that we're continually working with those individuals. And I feel like the conditions that were given to us now are things that we're going to continue to work on with them, whether or not there is an approval tonight. So that's just my concern there. And I would have a question for staff if you had a second, if that's all right.
I think that's acceptable.
So the question I have here is, does anything from a deferral tonight remove our opportunity to receive a grading permit on the site? Okay.
I can't make it, so somebody swing.
Mr. Chair.
I thought we were answering a question.
No, Josh answered it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Let the record show that Josh shook his head.
Okay. Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Aguilar,
I'd like to make a motion to defer DRH 24-00031 to the August 13 work session to allow the applicant to address some additional items, to resolve current items and any additional items as brought up in today's meeting, and hopefully get those resolved at the next work session.
Second.
we have a move and a second. Do we have any discussion? I will ask, did we officially defer to a work session, or would that be a deferral to a public hearing? Okay, another work session. 5:15. We have a motion, a second. Christine, would you please call the roll?
Simple,
Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Erstad,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Gesrick,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
All right, Mr. Chairman, we are past the 6 o'clock hour, so we'll just roll right into the hearing, but I will review the agenda just very briefly. So item number 1, DRH 25-00184, we will hear that item. Item number 2 is an appeal of DRH 25-00054. We will hear that item as well. Item number 3 is DRH 25-00113 at 2101 South Saturn Way. We would recommend approval of that on the consent agenda. And finally, item number 4, DRH 25-00102 at 3635 West Elder Street. We would recommend approval of that on the consent agenda as well.
Thank you, Josh. With that, I'd like to call to order the July 9th, 2025 Design Review Commission public hearing. Christine, would you please call the roll?
Dimple,
Here.
Marsh, Aguilar,
Here.
Erstad,
Here.
Johnson,
Here.
Gesrick,
Here.
5 present, 1 absent.
Thank you. And now, review of the Design Review Commission work session minutes and Commission public meeting minutes from June 11th. We're not going to officially review them, but do we have a motion on the approval of them?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Aguilar,
I'd like to make a motion to approve Design Review Commission work session minutes dated June 11th, 2025, and Design Review Commission meeting minutes dated June 11th, 2025.
so moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
I believe we have Commissioner Johnston.
Dimple,
Aye.
Aguilar.
Aye.
Erstad,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Gesrick,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
All right. Moving on to the creation of the consent agenda. We have for under consideration item number 3, DRH 25-00113 at 2101 South Saturn Way. Is the applicant present? Do you agree with all conditions, recommendations, etc.?
Dan Lardy, Levitt and Associates, 1324 First Street South. We agree with the conditions.
Thank you. Do we have anyone here to testify against this? Seeing none present, any online? Okay. None there either. Item number 4 is also considered for consent. Item DRH 25-00102 at 3635 West Elder Street. Is the applicant present? Do you agree with all conditions? Anyone here to testify in opposition? We have 1 in opposition, so we will not approve that on consent. So I want to clarify that you are in opposition. All right, thank you. We will hear that third on the list. We have a consent agenda. Do we have a motion on the creation and approval?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Semple,
I would move approval of the consent agenda consisting of item 3 DRH 25-00113.
moved in a second.
Second.
Motioned, seconded. Christina, would you please call the roll?
Dimple,
Aye.
Aguilar.
Aye.
Erstad,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Gesrick,
Aye. all
in favor, motion carries.
All right, that brings us to item number 1, DRH 25-00184 at 500 West Washington Street. Construct a new 4-story office building totaling approximately 73,000 square feet with structured parking on property in an MX3 zone. Caitlin, would you like to take us off?
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Chair, excuse me. I need to recuse myself from this hearing item.
Thank you, Commissioner Gesser. Josh, would you like him to step down from the dais?
All right. Thank you, commissioners. This is application DRH 25-184. The parcel is located on Washington Street between 5th Street and 6th Street. The property is comprised of 2 existing parcels that will be consolidated, and the existing structures and surface parking will be removed. On the ground floor along Washington Street, there are commercial tenant spaces and a lobby. Structured parking is accessed from the alley and occupies the back half of the ground level and the second level. The 3rd and 4th floors are office tenant spaces. The applicant will also construct the streetscape improvements with new landscaping and bike parking. The massing of the building is consistent with other structures in the immediate area. This is the view from the corner of 6th and Washington. The ground floor materials consist of storefront and brick. This is the view from Washington Street. There are frequent pedestrian entries with canopies. The planning team did feel the upper floors utilize a large amount of EPIS, which is not recommended as a primary material, especially in the downtown planning area. So we are recommending a condition to reduce the max percentage of EPIS to 20% on the south and west facades. On the east facade, there's the structured parking, and the upper floors are pulled back. So the planning team's recommendation is to approve the project with the recommended conditions. And I can stand for questions, or the applicant team is available to present.
Do you have any questions? Caitlin, this is an MX3 zone that has a 10-foot rear yard setback. Is there any pathway within the code for departure from that? And just knowing that many of the downtown style blocks are under an MX5 zone, which have no front or rear setbacks, and being 122 feet allow for 2 full double loaded parking aisles under the city's structured parking design guidelines. I just know that that would make for a much more efficient garage layout than that they're requesting. And is there any way, conversely, we have 16-foot wide alleys. If everyone in the MX3 zone, including like that block, has a 10-foot rear setback, that's a 36-foot wide alley. And I don't know that that necessarily aligns with the city's preference. Is there any sort of mechanism outside of rezoning within the code that would allow for a more full footprint on that block?
Mr. Chair, I'm just checking because I know we just went through some code edits. So I'm just checking to see what the current code is. This was not submitted under the most recent code update. So Mr. Chair, the most recent version of the code allows a 5-foot setback along an alley for a building, reduced from 10 to 5. If the applicant did want to take advantage of that, they would need to either request a variance for their current proposal, or they could just resubmit, which would probably be the easier option, resubmit the design review application under the current code.
That would still be 117-foot wide or deep building, and with 18-foot parking stalls, 22-foot drive lanes, and then a little bit of structure in there. I think they'd still technically not fit within that footprint. Is there?
Mr. Chair, the easiest way to get like a 0 setback would be to request the variance. Not easy, but that would be the only route. It would be to request that variance and then demonstrate that there is a hardship associated with the request.
Would that be a demonstrable hardship?
Mr. Chair, that would be at the discretion of the hearing examiner, but most likely not.
Thank you. Would you also speak to the percentage of active frontage on this project?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the applicant did provide their calculation for active frontage. So the active use requirement for this zone is 60% active uses. And the applicant's calculation is that they are providing a total of 76% active uses
Can we
along the street frontages.
check that math? I know bike parking does not count as an active use typically. I know parking does not count as an active use typically. And parking ramps almost certainly would not count as an active use. I know we're only looking at the 3 street facing frontages, not the alley, but as I did the takeoff, it was at about a 55% active frontage.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we can ask the applicant to address that, but staff would also be checking that prior to signing off on the final drawings. We would check that percentage to make sure it's in compliance because that is a requirement of the code. So there's no deviation from that through design review.
Thank you, Caitlin. Are there any other questions for staff? Sorry. Would the applicant like to come present? And please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Harley Elliott with Lombard Conrad Architects, 472 West Washington Street. Would you like me to address the active use question first before I present, or?
You're welcome to do it in whatever order you prefer.
Okay, I'll just address it real quick. I know we had some struggles with the site being kind of as constrained as it is and using that ramp to get our parking calculations and getting up to that second level parking. When we considered active use, we did take into account the west, south, and east sides. And we worked with staff after the interdepartmental review and then through some correspondence through email that the bench planter situation on the west side where that ramp is coming up would count as an active use space for pedestrians. And then we did, and I think our total active use was more along the lines of 60%. I don't think it was 76% because I know we had to stretch it. So I would say it's closer to 61% per code. But Caitlin kind of laid out the site and whatnot for you guys, but I'll give you a little background on the design intent. Like I said, there were a bit of challenges which we needed to overcome, mostly parking in that active use. We needed 99 parking spaces, and that did require us to have a second story parking while maintaining tenant spaces and active use on those street facing sides. So the ramp was a big question of where to place that. After corresponding with the city, we didn't want it off of 5th or 6th Street as they are active, and alley access is the best and safest access for that. So we put it at that northeast corner. And yeah, that did kind of create an issue of active use on there, but we did again work with the city to get that bench and planter space, and it also kind of adds to that facade because it is a little more blank. So we've got soft plantings and stuff like that. It also counts as our amenity space, but we also have a cafe seating on the other side. So we kind of wanted to make those perimeters as active as we could while pushing to those property lines and setbacks. So we talked about the active space, and one of those active spaces off the corner of 6th and Washington, we've dedicated that as a tenant space for a cafe, like a neighborhood cafe, with cafe seating outside. And we think it's a really good business opportunity, as in this area has a lot of buildings that are mostly offices, but nothing really amenity like that. You have to kind of walk further into downtown to get something like that. Yeah, and we talked about the challenges of the 5th Street active use. With the material palette, we did follow the design standards for the downtown guidelines. In this area, it is recommended 50% or less of stucco EIFS. So we tried to stay under that, and the south and east or south and west sides are 35%. We did do some mock-ups where we extended the metal panel, and you can kind of get it down to around 25%, but less than 20% is a lot, and it kind of does affect the composition of the facade a bit more. We've got concrete masonry on the back alley face that matches the brick, so there's a seamless transition from active use to alley facing side. We've got brick on the bottom that matches a lot of the brick you see downtown. So it's a familiar material and with surrounding context. And then you've got the upper, which is a darker ephes and metal panel with some metal detailing on that. And in order to incorporate all those together, we used a dark storefront and accented the bottom, the lower level with metal panel. So it all kind of ties together with, but still creating a pedestrian usage on the ground floor that is a little more familiar with that brick. We went, in order to create a more efficient parking system and structural layout, we based it on a bay system, and most of them are very similar to each other, but their long facade is broken up by the entry bay. And it kind of has its own identity with the metal panel going from the first floor all the way to the fourth floor and having that patio that's intended for the Farm Bureau offices use on the top to break up that extended facade. We also include canopies at all the entries that aren't just over the entries. They extend the entire storefront to kind of create a better pedestrian usage and from weather protection and that. We wanted to kind of, because Boise zoning code was updated to accommodate the growth of Boise, the proposed building design we feel helps accommodate that growth, whether it's tenant spaces or, like we said, that cafe space to bring a little more livelihood into this capital district. I'm here if you have any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for the applicant? Seeing none. If you are done using your time, you've got lots, but
Yes.
all right. Thank you. We'll move into the public testimony portion, starting with the signed up list. First being Mohans or Mohaz. Awesome. If you could state your name and address for the record.
Sure. My name is Mohaz, 501 West Franklin Street. Just for your reference, I own the property that would be directly behind where this project would be loading and unloading all of their vehicles. That's my backyard right across the alleyway. I'm a lawyer. I'm a fourth generation Idahoan. I went to University of Idaho College of Law, and I present to city councils often for my clients, but today I'm not going to wear a lawyer hat because I also learned in law school that a lawyer should never be their own lawyer. So I'm not going to attempt to do that. And I also fundamentally trust you all to make the right decisions in this case. What I wanted to share with you, though, is more of a personal position about this thing, not just for myself, but also for my neighbors who live in the historic overlay district that's just across the street from me, right across Franklin. Quick backstory, and I apologize if this is too gushy, but I told you I graduated from the University of Idaho College of Law. I was part of the first cohort that did all 3 years in what was the old Ada County Courthouse. And during that time, I parked my car right next to the building that I was fortunate enough to be able to purchase 2 years after passing the bar and practicing law. So that's the property that is right behind what will be a 70-foot tall wall that I look at from the back of my building. And that's frustrating for me, but I appreciate, as a litigator who primarily practices in real property litigation, I am being a fourth generation Idahoan. I appreciate that the applicant can do with their property what the law will permit, and you are the gatekeepers on the design of that thing. And my primary issue with the design, my only reason to be here is that ingress egress for the parking spot. I'm one residential lot in a block of commercial buildings. And fortunately, they're all small right now, but they won't be with this project. I don't understand necessarily why all of the traffic has to flow right behind the one residential lot. I'm not a part of the historic district. I am in MX3 zoning as well, so I guess that is what it is. But in any event, I was hopeful that the ingress egress for this parking garage would have come off of a street. I understand that that may not be what the code would prefer, that it would require a variance. I would hope that that variance could be sought for this project. Again, that may be somewhat selfish for me. But also I struggle to see with the plans that I've looked at how that is a safe point of access off of Fifth Street. And it seemed like there could be congestion. And again, certainly for me, I have my own not inhibitions, but frustrations about the idea of 99 cars twice a day coming in and out right behind my property. So in any event, my only other comment is that the property that I bought was the home for 50 years of Cornelia. Oh, I'm over. Never mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, forgive me, I believe we have Susan DeSeelhurst. Take what I can get up here. Would you please state your name and address for the record?
Susan DeSelhorst, 421 West Franklin Street. I live across Fifth Street from Mo. And I agree with him. The fact that they're going to alley load this is one of our main concerns. I mean, why not load it off Washington like the state garage across the street from it, or off 6th Street like the other garage? So that's a problem. The fact that the parking isn't screened, I think, is something that's really not fair to the neighbors. You know, you're supposed to, according to Blueprint Boise, have this symbiotic relationship with your neighbors in the downtown district. And I don't see where there's anything symbiotic about dropping a big black box that takes up half a city block, where mine's 130 years old, Moses 105, you know, all these nice old houses. And then you're going to put in this modern looking dark structure amongst white, light green, blue. Okay, my house is kind of dark blue. So those are some of our bigger concerns. The choice of the color, the way the garage is structured, and just the lack of sympathy to the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else here to testify? Any online? All right, with that, we will close the public testimony portion of this item. Allowing first rebuttal from the applicant.
First off, we'd like to address the alley access to the parking garage. Originally in our design, we did have access to the parking garage from either 5th or 6th or both. And one of the comments in the interdepartmental review was that they would like it off the alley side. So we were a bit constricted into what our preference was versus what the city wanted. And essentially it was more along the lines of, if we have an alley, that's where we want our access to the parking garage. In comment on the design itself or the size of the building itself in the zoning, it does encourage density. And I believe there is a minimum story, I think like 4 stories, and a maximum of 70 feet. So it's kind of it's within the zoning code and the plan that they have for this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's totally closed. We're done with the public portion. Open it up to discussion on the commission.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Semple.
Yeah, I think I understand the frustration when you're looking at traffic coming off an alley that's right behind your homes. Unfortunately, as you're probably all well aware, ACHD controls all of our public rights of way, and they have a lot of policy requirements for where traffic comes from, typically the lesser classified roadway, and in this, or an alley if it's available. Unfortunately, that pretty much restricts any property access to an alley if it's built and available. And typically the staff and our code falls in line with what ACHD's policies are regarding access. So I think that's where kind of the project gets pushed to that, understanding the frustration from neighbors. But I think I just want to talk to that. One of the other things I wanted to talk about a little bit was the landscape plan. There's like 18 shrubs and 299 perennials that are in the planter strips. The tree selection's great. The plant palette for within shrubs, perennials, ground covers needs some major attention. All of the plants are deciduous or perennial. So evergreen ground covers, small shrubs, there's a lot of other options available to diversify that plant palette. I think having worked with in the past on other projects with some of the designers, I think that I don't know if I need to add that as a condition. I can if the rest of the commission feels that we should. I think I have some confidence that the applicant can work with their consultants to make the required revisions. I just wanted to bring that up because as a landscape architect, I appreciate architectural design and what you guys are doing. I primarily am looking at the site and the planting plans and stuff. So that would be my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Zippel. Excuse me.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Johnson.
I would say my major concern with this is aesthetically, it really lacks any interesting character that the surrounding neighborhood brings to the community. And I think, to start down this road and create a pattern for future builds that are going to be incorporated into neighborhoods, I just think if we put the brakes on building a giant building in the middle of a cute neighborhood, so that this doesn't happen all over the city, I would encourage maybe some softer building materials, some lighter color, some breaking up of the space. It doesn't fit at all with the neighborhood aesthetic. And if this were going in my neighborhood, I would, it's just not a welcoming structure. I suppose that's it. I don't know what to say about the parking and the in and out of the traffic flow. If there's nothing that can be done about that, then I suppose that's how it is. But I would just encourage some looking at different building materials for sure, different color palette.
Thank you. I think, Mr. Simple, if you feel confident without adding conditions to the landscaping, that is your wheelhouse. I wouldn't pretend to know enough about deciduous shrubs to really be of use there. I think that to address kind of the parking concerns and the design concerns, I think that some of the neighbors have brought some valid points. We can't necessarily change the access point with regards to it being on the alley, but I think the fact that access point is directly off of another street could actually be pretty problematic. You have people coming down the ramp and trying to turn in the same location. I think if that access point were mid-block, you might have a little bit more kind of cushion built into either of those actions. So you're not having anyone load up in 5th Street or anything like that. The design materiality, I'm of an opinion that EIFS does not belong in our downtown core. It doesn't belong this close to our state capitol building, and it would take some pretty artistic detailing to make it necessarily worthy. I'd say that is a matter of taste, but I'm certainly not about to back off on staff's requirement to reduce it. If anything, I would reduce it to 0 on the south, east, and west, and allow it begrudgingly along the alley side. I believe the last time the applicant design team was here, they presented a really beautiful, classically inspired office building that incorporated some very interesting masonry and some very nice detailing, and it was very referential of the location in which it was placed. And this is a big black floating box that barely touches the base of the site, and I just think this needs a lot more work. I agree that the parking should probably be screened, if nothing else, to help connect that upper mass to the lower mass. And I think we definitely need to see materials in hand and at an upcoming date. I'm disappointed in the awnings at the street level. I don't think there's enough of them. They might meet the bare minimum standard, but I wouldn't say meeting the bare minimum is ever desired. It's the bare minimum. If staff thinks that the benches along the east side count as an active frontage, I think that's within their power to approve or not. I disagree. I think that the east frontage is not active. I think that's a parking ramp, and a couple benches and a landscape planter will not change that. But I appreciate the idea of a cafe on the southwest corner. I think that will hopefully get a lot of good use. Interested to know what ends up going mid-block. That one might be a little more difficult to lease up, but hopefully not. I think at this point I'd entertain a motion. If anyone has one. I think that motion could either involve a deferral to a later public hearing. That motion could include a work session, or that motion could be for denial.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Aguilar.
I'm concerned about the color palette, but I'm also looking at the adjacent buildings. I mean, we have probably 1960s, 70s vintage precast type structure on one side of it. We have a parking garage on another, parking garage on a third side. So I think in context of the area, immediate area, I don't know that I have a lot of issues with the structure other than the color palette. I empathize with the access to the garage and the adjacent neighbor. But I think we should also consider the general context of the vicinity and the neighbors around us. And if this were on a different location, I'd more in the core, obviously I'd have different concerns about it. But I don't know. I think that's something maybe commission should think about as well. And maybe a deferral is warranted to maybe have the applicant, review the color scheme. But it's in a tough spot.
Thank you, Commissioner Aguilar.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think I was kind of leaning in the same direction because it is a tough spot. You've got right adjacent to our downtown core, there's some older houses, residential uses that are right there that are remnants that, they're beautiful and it's wonderful that they're there. And I wouldn't want them to go away, but, it's been infilled with over the years with some maybe not brutalist architecture, but close to it, which, contextualizes this a little bit differently than if this was in the middle of, the North End or something like that. So while I do have some sympathy for, if you're living next to a project that gets built, I mean, everyone is impacted by construction regardless of where it is. But I think I'm leaning more towards, I think the color palette needs work. I think the parking should be screened. I think there could be the aforementioned enhancements to the landscape plan and probably some of the activity along that eastern side. There may be a way to enhance that activity a little bit more. I'd leave that up to the applicant to try to figure out, but I think that, along the lines of Commissioner Aguilar's comments, it feels like a deferral to address a lot of those would be appropriate. I'd be curious if the other two commissioners up here feel the same way.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Johnson?
My understanding that's right, that we're saying the context of this build is that it's surrounded by other buildings that feel similar, have a similar like look and feel.
Yeah, I think that
Or
it's just that there's some other kind of more commercial
Yeah.
type buildings immediately adjacent. So it's,
My inclination is to say that that's a reason to not put more of it.
Hmm.
Like, don't keep adding to the brutalist architect,
Yeah.
the less desirable. If there's an opportunity now,
Hmm.
like to curve that look down there, then do it. Don't add to it. I mean, I think a deferral is the right motion at this point and move to a work session to address not just color palette, but to address the entire look and feel of the building.
and Mr. Chair, so Commissioner Johnson, you're so deferring, but it would be a public work session again, or public hearing, and then potentially a work session to review additional details of the revised design after that. Is that kind of what you're
I don't know
thinking
what
too?
the correct order
Yeah.
is, but
Okay.
a work session with a second go at the design.
I think for clarity's sake, a deferral would put this as another public hearing item
Mhm.
at a later public hearing. A condition for a work session would allow the applicant to come back prior to a public hearing on the same night, but in the hour prior, for a work session to address very specific items. I think if we think that this is a major overhaul, then a deferral would be appropriate to rehear it under a revised design concept. If we think that this is minor tweaking, it would be a condition for a work session with specific items of review within that work session. I think I would weigh in Commissioner Johnson's camp. I think tripling down on the brutalist or just outright industrial I don't want to write this corner off. I think that there's a lot of value in creating value here and making this a better environment. I think that I'm not arguing against the scale or even necessarily the shape of the building, but I think that the treatment of the facades is inadequate, and I don't think that it does much of a job of addressing the neighborhood to the north or bettering the parking garages to the south.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Simple.
I think that, from what I'm hearing, there's a lot of concerns that I don't think get addressed in just a work session. I'm going to make a motion to see if it sticks with the rest of everyone. I would move deferral of item DRH 25-00184 to the August 13th public hearing for design review.
We have a motion. Do I have a
And
se-
sorry, Mr. Chair, if I can add to allow for the applicant to address comments and concerns from the commission discussion tonight.
I'll count that as a single motion.
Yeah.
Do we have a second or counter motion?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Christina, would you please call the roll?
Simple.
Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Erstad,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
All right, moving on to item number 2, the appeal of DRH 25-00054. The project in question is at 3115 North Sycamore Drive. This is an appeal of an administrative design review approval to convert a skilled nursing facility into a 53-unit independent senior living residential complex on property in an R2 zone. Catherine, would you take it away?
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Before you is the appeal of the administrative approval to convert a closed nursing facility into a senior living apartment and this subject property in the R2 zone. And this proposal is to reuse an existing structure with no change to the building footprint, and the multifamily is allowed use in this zone. A type 2 application, which is a minor design review, was the only application required for this project. I will give you a brief project background before getting to the appeal grounds and the city's response. The 3-acre property is located approximately 350 feet east of West District and adjacent to the Sycamore neighborhood. It has a mixed-use land use designation. The existing facility was formerly operated as a skilled nursing home, which had closed for business in April of 2021. The applicant requests to adaptively reuse the existing facility by converting the patient rooms into apartments and minimally upgrading the interior common areas and applying new paint to the exterior. The project will provide 22 off-street parking. Required long-term and short-term bicycle parking will be provided on-site as well. The applicant has demonstrated safe access onto Sycamore Drive and provided connected pedestrian paths within the project site. Here is a summary of the application history. A detailed summary is included in your packet. This appeal is an open record. That means the commission can accept and review project-related plans and new evidence this evening. The commission can make a broad range of decisions based on the discussion tonight. The DRC can uphold, deny, modify, or attach conditions to the decision being appealed. The appellant submitted 4 grounds of appeal as summarized on this slide. Along with the response to the appeal grounds provided in the appeal memo, staff will address each of these issues in the following presentation. The appellant contends that exclusion of the parcel, which was formerly used as a parking lot for the nursing home, will leave the proposed use with insufficient parking and result in parking overflow onto the adjacent streets. In response to the appeal issue, the project proposal is in compliance with Boise City Code's parking requirements in terms of location and number of parking space provided. As listed here, Boise City Code requires all required parking shall be provided on the same lot or combination of contiguous lots. The parcel mentioned by the appellant, which is showing in red here on this map, is not a contiguous lot and is located approximately 300 feet away. Under the current code, it would not be allowed to use for providing the required parking, or its location is conducive for the future residents of this project. The appellant also contends that this project is subject to a condition posed by a 1971 CUP conditional use permit approval, which required the off-site parcel to provide parking for the expansion of the former nursing home. This CUP approval is not applicable since the nursing home use had been abandoned. This project is not subject to the condition of this CUP. Further, this project was allowed for 50% parking reduction through adaptive reuse incentive per city code. As such, a minimum of 22 parking spaces was required, and this requirement has been met by this project proposal. Additionally, I wanted to point out that this subject property is close to large-scale retail, large-scale grocery, many restaurants, retails, offices, a public park, and first-in-class transit routes along State Street. As such, using alternative transportation is feasible for the residents of this project. The appellant also contends that this application should go through a conditional use permit process, as the nursing facility remained partially open for COVID cares in the past 3 years. As evidenced in your packet, on April 20, 2021, a license of the nursing facility was terminated by the Department of Health and Human Services. A newspaper clip submitted by the appellant shows that the facility was leased to provide patient services during COVID between 2021 to 2022. But this use was a medical use. It was not a nursing home or any of the principal use listed in the section of code that would require a conditional use permit process for establishment of this proposed use. As such, this is not a valid appeal ground. This application was reviewed under appropriate type of planning application and procedure. In response to appeal ground 3, the code allows both exterior and internal recreational areas to be counted towards the open space requirement. Although the new surface parking will be created through converting part of the existing green space, the remainder of the green space will still contribute 31% of usable open space to the site. In addition to that, the common area lounge computer room inside the facility that will be preserved can also contribute to this requirement as well. And this requirement has been met by the application, and this is not a valid appeal ground as well. The appellant contends that many of the existing internal common areas and amenities were gray shaded, and whether they will be preserved were unidentified on the plans. The internal common areas should be preserved per Boise City Code for providing required amenities for development larger than 1 acre in size. In response to this appeal ground, the existing amenities are proposed to be preserved. This information was provided in the applicant's letter of intent received on March 20 of 2025, and it was part of the project record. In conclusion, the appellant has not demonstrated valid grounds for appeal. The planning director's decision was not shown to violate constitutional, federal, state, or city law. The decision was within the planning director's statutory authority. Within the conditions of approval, the project does comply with design review findings and the standards of statewide design review guidelines. All required procedures associated with the design review application, submittal, and post-decision noticing were followed. With that, the planning team recommends Design Review Commission to deny the appeal and uphold the administrative approval. I just want to mention that we received 19 written testimonies from the public, 6 in favor, 13 opposed. 3 public comments were not received before our late correspondence cut off due to a system error on the city side. The concerns in these 3 common letters include inadequate parking, destruction of green space, lack of detail regarding to the site amenities, as well as a lack of a public hearing process. These concerns were addressed in my presentation earlier on. With that, I stand for any further questions.
Thank you, Catherine. Do we have any questions for staff?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Semple?
Catherine, while the parking lot that's not adjacent isn't included in determining the parking regulations or the parking that's provided, do you know if is that parcel still owned by the ownership of this new project? And if so, do you know if they're making it available for parking?
I believe the parcel, the offsite parcel is owned by the same owner of this project, and then it is not included in this project proposal. And this project parking requirement has been met by the on-site parking.
As a follow-up, they could use the parking lot though if they wanted to as just a surface parking lot for people not to, because they've met their standard on-site, they could still have people park in that other parking lot.
That
Just as
is-
overflow, not to meet their standard, not to meet the requirement, but just as additional, because it's a parking lot that they own.
I believe that is under the discretion of the parcel owner as for the project proposal, use of offsite parking would not satisfy the parking requirement, and the parking requirement has been met by the on-site parking that's provided by the project.
Yeah, thank you.
I think because of the parking requirements and their specificity, I think it's probably important to note that offsite parking is really not relevant to the discussion. If we cannot necessarily mandate the applicant, whether they control it or not, to use offsite parking unless that were a condition of the approval, and I don't believe it was the initial approval, correct?
Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Was there any additional process, any sort of reduction associated with the parking that has been approved?
Mr. Chair, the only parking reduction was requested and allowed is through the adaptive reuse parking reduction, which is 50%.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? In that case, next on our order of operations here is the appellant. Is the appellant present? Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Meyer Larry Hofstetter, and my address is 3272 North Sycamore Drive. Okay. All right. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, my husband Ryan, and several of our neighbors who live near the nursing home and the proposed site of Sycamore Commons. First, thank you for your time for reviewing the appeal letters and documents submitted by ourselves, the applicant, and our neighbors. We genuinely appreciate your effort to fully understand this project and the potential impact it may have on our neighborhood and the future residents of the development. Before I dive in, let me take a breath. I just want to note that we put together the exhibits attached to our letters in a specific order to maintain clarity for our appeal. In the memo, you received one of the exhibits showing signage related to the COVID care performed in 2022 was omitted. This was the exhibit we submitted from the memo, as well as the design review record online. Other exhibits were uploaded in a different order, so I wanted to briefly review the 4 items we submitted. First, our first letter, which had 5 attachments or exhibits labeled A through F, a second letter, which had exhibits labeled 1 through 4, and then also 2 documents were submitted through email. The first one was over concern sent on June 27th about the public hearing postings not meeting requirements The second and final submission was an additional document we received from Public Records demonstrating the link between the parking parcel and the nursing home. So we are clearly deeply invested in the future of this site. Ryan and I both have personal connections to the nursing home on Sycamore Drive. Ryan visited his great-grandmother there until her passing, and I often visited a close family friend. Those visits left a lasting impression. We remember a place of care, connection, and community. Ryan remembers regular community days that celebrated the ties with the neighborhood. As adults, we've come to appreciate the building's historical role as a place of rehabilitation and healing. It represents more than just a building. It holds a legacy that we hope can be honored and continued. This neighborhood is not just where we live. We've chosen to raise our family here and build our future. I grew up visiting close friends on Tamarack Drive, and I admired their lifestyle of growing their own food and living closely with the land. When Ryan and I were ready to settle down, we searched intentionally for a home in this specific neighborhood because we wanted to live among people who value green space, community, and agricultural traditions. We felt comfort moving in, knowing that the Sycamore neighborhood plan was well established with the city and that it protected these values for many years to come. Boise City shares that same sentiment. They say it is to preserve and encourage land use and development that is consistent with the semi-rural agricultural character and lifestyle of the Sycamore neighborhood. We were surprised to receive notice of an adaptive reuse approval for a multifamily 55 plus housing complex without any opportunity to engage or provide input. I'm showing two parcels in the image. These are the two parcels that have been tied together since 1971 for the nursing home. When we moved into this neighborhood, we understood that if there were to be a transition of the nursing home facility to another use, this would require a conditional use permit. This felt like a safeguard, giving the neighborhood a chance to participate in that process and address longstanding concerns. The applicant and some neighbors reported that there was information communicated to the neighborhood about the project. However, those of us that live nearest the facility did not receive any communication. You can see here the addresses of those that shared via public comment that they received information from the developer in orange, and those that shared via public comment or will testify today that they learned about the project from the city once it had already been approved. I noted that those that received the information live further away than those more directly impacted and closer to the project. The nursing home's current approved use operates thanks to a conditional use permit that dates back to the 1950s for this specific use as a skilled nursing facility. So we must address the question of whether this project qualifies as an adaptive reuse or whether a conditional use permit is required under city code. The Good Samaritan Nursing Facility stopped operating this site in 2021. The applicant submitted documents that show this. What was not submitted by the applicant is that the building was rented to Cascadia Healthcare and operated as a nursing facility well into 2022. We have submitted an article from Skilled Nursing News that describes this use by Cascadia Healthcare. Cascadia previously leased the building from Good Samaritan between the fall of 2021 and the summer of 2022, operating the facility as a location for COVID patients during a crisis in hospital access over that time period. This is an indisputable fact that many remember, including the firefighters and first responders that made regular visits to the nursing home. The applicant has cited Section Standard 110303 2H3, stating that if within the past 3 years, the principal use of the site included convalescent or nursing home, a conditional use permit is the correct process to be followed. Further, the correct interpretation of this law is that the use is based on the current approved use of the site. This site has no other approval for use other than a nursing home. The 3-year period has not been met, and thus this development must follow the conditional use process, a process that exists for a reason, to ensure meaningful public engagement and responsible development for both the future and current residents of the neighborhood. Also, it appears the application may propose changes to the architectural elements that would constitute more than a simple adaptive reuse. Boise Code defines this as the modification of an existing building for new uses while maintaining the architectural integrity of the original structure. The application proposes conversion of the nursing home building to 53 independent living studio and one-bedroom apartments, presumably requiring the reconfiguration of walls and installation of kitchen and bathroom facilities, among other changes. The site plans submitted with the application are fairly vague. They merely present a black box identifying the general locations of the proposed apartments within the building without detailing the actual configurations of the rooms and the architectural changes. Excuse me. Further evidence of the extent of the architectural changes likely required is the duration and magnitude in visits of contractors, even before the project completes the approval process. Last month, we witnessed over a week of daily and continuous visits from contractors to the site, such that vehicles were parked lining both sides of the street. The proposed change in use to family housing appears to necessitate significant architectural changes to the building and will not be a simple adaptive reuse of the existing building. This is further evidence to support the need for a conditional use permit process. For parking, traffic and parking have been real challenges as described in our neighbor David Kordiak's letter, and I'm sure more neighbors will note today in their testimony. Parking has been an issue for this site historically, and it is why there is an additional parking parcel that's been attached to the nursing home since 1971. This parcel was included in the sale of the property to LEAP. However, the applicant has not included the parcel in this multifamily proposal. Under the code's guidance, the prior use is defined by the prior use approvals. This parking lot is an inherent part of the approved nursing home use that the applicant seeks to adaptively reuse and should be included as part of the application. Instead of using this already existing parking, the applicant plans to remove green space on the property to construct an additional and much smaller 19-space parking lot. This removal of green space is not aligned with the Sycamore neighborhood. Additionally, it appears that the open space requirement has not been met. The Boise zoning ordinance rewrite states that if a dwelling is located on an R2 property, the open space shall have a minimum dimension of 15 feet. The applicant claims to have met the 30% open space requirement. However, when looking at aerial photos, it seems that this is only true if including green spaces that are under 15 feet wide around the perimeter of the building. The proposed new parking lot will have 19 spaces. This will not be enough for 53 apartments for age 55 plus residents. These will be independent living spaces where the residents as young as 55 will be fully able to engage in normal activities, including operation of a vehicle and entertaining guests who use vehicles. There will be a need for parking for all 53 units, some potentially having 2 or even more drivers and frequent visitors. In ACHD's report, they cited that the parking rate for this type of development is 0.61 per unit, which would require 32 parking spaces. The current 22 spaces referenced in the plan does not meet this requirement. Additionally, ACHD noted that on-street parking may be removed along Sycamore at any time and can't be relied upon. We believe this is why ADHD is recommending revisions be made to the plan. Excuse me. So we think we do need to think realistically about where the overflow vehicles will park if the current parking lot is not used. A quick visit to this neighborhood and you'll see that Sycamore is narrow. There's already no parking on the east side of the road. There's no parking near the fire station right next to the facility. There's no parking on Taft leading up to the facility, and Sycamore is also a designated bike path. All of these factors combined means that there is no alternative parking location except for the affiliated parking parcel. The applicant noted that the original parking parcel is too far from the entrance for the elderly, and this is why the construction of the new parking lot is required. If this is the primary concern, there are maybe other solutions that will impact the neighborhood less and provide a better living experience for the future residents. Additionally, LEAP's proposed solution to the problem is to leverage on-street parking. This is not a solution to the problem, as walking long distances is inherent to using on-street parking. This issue raised by LEAP remains unresolved. Lastly, I will note regarding parking that ACHD's report cited concerns about the proposal, but no full traffic impact study was completed to fully assess them. At a minimum, this should be revisited through the conditional use permit process, which allows more thorough analysis. In the appeal, we also raised concerns about the ambiguity in the submitted site plan. There are large grayed out areas in the current plan that were not clearly labeled or explained. The applicant did briefly cover those in their letter of intent. The line read, renovations will consist of 53 residential units, a common area, lounge, computer room, storage, and laundry. In reviewing the floor plans publicly available of the site's current use, it becomes apparent that only a small percentage of this gray space can be used for those purposes without extensive remodel. And without clearer details, it's difficult to know how the identified uses would fill the ambiguous space for all the stated purposes, or perhaps whether these spaces could later be converted into more housing, changing the density and impact of the project. You can see an earlier version of the project proposed 1-bedroom and studio apartments in some of these ambiguous areas when you compare the two, requiring more specific plans and confirmation of the intended use for these areas would provide the transparency and clarity required to assess the project completely. We have shared and will restate that we're not opposed to affordable housing. This is not an issue of affordable housing. In the letter submitted, the applicant falsely stated that our concerns are related to affordable housing, but we have not mentioned one time that as a concern. And all of our real concerns are independent of the rental price of a unit or the income of the residents. We want to be part of a collaborative solution for affordable housing and finding a project that really fits the needs of this space, one that supports new affordable housing while also respecting the character and needs of the existing neighborhood and providing the future residents a home that is comfortable. In reality, I think we are all in agreement of the need for the community feedback to be incorporated to provide the best integrated project. We truly believe that through that process, we can explore creative ideas together, like a pathway connecting to nearby businesses, community garden space, or shared gathering areas that strengthen community ties. Items like these are what can make this development part of the Sycamore neighborhood identity instead of just the apartments next to it. In conclusion, we believe it is both appropriate and necessary for legal and community reasons that this project go through the conditional use permit process and that the parking parcel remain integrated in the site plan to support the long-term success of the project and the neighborhood. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Now we will hear from the applicant.
Good evening and thank you very much. My name is Jason Densmer. I'm with the Land Group and our address is 462 East Shore Drive in Eagle. I'm here tonight representing Leap Housing as the applicant. We've been working with staff over the past several months and have made changes to the application, getting through the process of the minor design review and arriving at a conditions of approval that were satisfactory to us and that met all of the city's requirements. As the appellant has submitted their appeal, we also continue to support staff's position that and their analysis that they presented to you tonight, that the appeal does not rise to the level of addressing the issues that we already have resolved through the design review, the minor design review application, and the approval that we enjoy. I would just kind of bring you up to speed on a couple of the items that were addressed tonight. The regarding appeal condition, or the contention number one of the appeal regarding the original parking parcel. We have had to configure the parking at the property. There were historically about 15 90-degree parking spaces along Sycamore that required people who parked in them to back out into Sycamore Drive to exit. Neither the city nor ACHD thought that that was a safe condition. And so as part of the approval and working through ACHD and their staff report, we've agreed that we need to remove those 90-degree parking spaces and are replacing them with 4 ADA compliant parallel parking spaces along Sycamore Drive. In addition to those 4, there is space on the west side of Sycamore for additional parallel parking, but in accordance with ACHD staff report that said that that could be removed, we aren't counting any of the on-street parallel parking on the west side of Sycamore towards the project's required parking. All of the required parking is being provided in a new parking lot within the subject parcel in accordance with the city's requirements. The design review approval that we have does have a few conditions of approval about how that parking lot is configured. And as we continue the design process, we can easily accommodate those conditions of approval in terms of moving the parking lot to slightly better respect the setbacks. All that to say, we can accomplish what the city's goals under the code are in terms of meeting the minimum parking requirement within the project parcel, not including any on-street parking, except for the 4 ADA spaces that are focused right at the building's front entrance. The appeal contention number 2, it regards the conditional use permit. We think this one is pretty straightforward. The code says that conditional use permit would be required if the property had been used for skilled nursing within the past 3 years, and it has not been by the termination of the license in April of 2021. Any other uses of the property between then and now are kind of irrelevant to that discussion, because the code says if it hasn't been used for skilled nursing in more than 3 years, a conditional use permit's not required. And we had evaluated that with staff early in the process, and staff advised us that we were on the correct path for the applications that we were including in our submittals. Contention number 3 regards the open space. We actually have quite a bit more than 30% open space remaining, even after converting a portion of the current green space to the parking use. In the applicant's response to the appeal, we pointed out that there's approximately 31% of the property still remaining in open space. The code standard isn't that 31% of the property be open space. The code standard is 31% of the residential building footprint. And so, we really overcalculated the amount of open space that was provided as a percentage by referencing it to the entire parcel size, not just to the residential building size. In addition to that difference, we also didn't include any of the interior open space components within the building that are also eligible for inclusion in the percentage. Lastly, the contention that the application was ambiguous. We couldn't disagree more. We worked hard to submit a complete application that met all of the city's requirements and checklists. We answered questions as they came to us from staff and ACHD, and worked together with them to ensure that they had complete understanding of the project proposal before they issued us the approval. With that, I think I've spoken to everything that I should, but if I have questions or if I left something undiscussed, would you please let me know?
Josh, mea culpa. I forgot to open the commission to questions to the appellant prior. Is there a way to, well, first of all, I think it's more relevant if anyone has a question for the appellant from the commission. Does anyone? No? Okay. So I guess it's not really pertinent, but
And Mr.
I
Chair-
want to make sure and offer that same opportunity to both. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant at this point?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Simple.
Jason, real quickly, do you happen to know what the percentage is based on the residential building footprint of the open space, including the interior and exterior? You said you're well over the 30%. Do you happen to know what that is?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Simple, I don't have the percentage in front of me, but obviously it's much larger than 30.
Yeah, okay. And then, Mr. Chair, another question real quick. I asked this of staff earlier. I know that your project meets the standard for parking on site. You're required to have all your parking on site. Your client still owns that other parking lot parcel. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Do they intend to offer that for guests, not having to meet any requirements or, enter into some sort of agreement? Can they still functionally operate that thing as a parking lot?
Mr. Simple, I would butt in here. I don't want the applicant to be held to any standard that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, they're not required to provide it. I'm just curious. They're saying there's on-street parking that they're not calculating.
Right.
Is that
I
also
think it's
something they're
just,
not
I
calculating?
mean, they would be within their rights to sell that parcel
Yeah,
tomorrow.
okay.
So
I'm just curious.
I think we can just wait and see.
Okay. Withdraw my question.
All right. Thank you. Up next, we have the public testimony, beginning with Susan Bond. I think I got that one right. Would you please state your name and address for the record?
I'm Susan Bond. I live at 3011 North Ennis Street. And I don't know how familiar the applicant is with our neighborhood, but maybe not so much. It's unreasonable to assume that more than half of the LEAP residents will not have vehicles. And if they do, where are they going to park? Not only will Sycamore be affected, but Taft, which is yet to be improved, will likely be impacted. It is reasonable to assume that people looking for the closest parking place will not drive all the way down Sycamore if Silver and Plum would be closer, only to have to walk home on Taft. An added aggravation, and probably a dangerous one, is if the walk light in front of Interfaith Sanctuary on State Street is lengthened, which they talked about on Monday. Commuters are going to cut through my neighborhood to get around the stalled traffic there. They're already using my neighborhood as a cut through, and once IFS is opened, there will be an even greater impact on Ennis and Plum Streets, as well as Taft, Hawthorne, and Sycamore, as they try to avoid the light at Interfaith. By not providing adequate parking, serious problems are created. This is a neighborhood with no sidewalks, but plenty of dog walkers, bicycles, and scooters. We're already going to be impacted by the residents of Interfaith as their facility has limited parking. People's safety will be compromised as more foot traffic will be competing with cars driving around looking for parking in a neighborhood with no sidewalks. I urge you to consider the danger for our neighborhood by allowing development to compromise our safety and well-being. Please require more parking for the LEAP facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Mim Davidson. Would you please state your name and address for the record?
Hi, Mim Davidson, 3422 North Tamarack Drive. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak. We were told that our initial comments were not included in your packages because of email issues. I support the appeal regarding Sycamore Commons. Housing projects like this are needed. This reuse makes sense in many ways, but my husband and I do have several concerns. We're concerned about the lack of transparency and clear communication, especially with the immediate neighbors who will be most impacted. This is clearly a significant use change. I looked back through Collister Neighborhood Association minutes, and I think I found a mention of this in the April notes. But however, using a neighborhood association is a very limiting method to communicate with residents, as the residents have to opt in. The Collister neighborhood includes a large physical area. Does the neighborhood association ensure that folks along Sycamore Drive know about the proposals? Why does the city not ensure communication directly with those who live closest? Some variance cases require it, so why not this? While a nursing facility required parking, changing to 53 residences will increase that need even more. Parking is a premium in this area. The parking lot at the southeast corner of Taft and Sycamore, the auxiliary parking area, was identified as necessary for the nursing facility as part of the 1998 Sycamore Neighborhood Plan. This is a plan that's on file with the city as requiring land use and lot sizes and so forth. It is critical for this modification too. A Hawk pedestrian option could address many of the concerns about using that existing lot. It does not make sense to pave over the lawn. Not only would this park-like area be appreciated by the residents of housing and the neighborhood, it would support the city's green space emphasis. You know, on-street parking is a significant challenge. Many people walk and bike Sycamore neighborhood streets. And Sycamore is a through street from State Street to Catalpa, and there's a school and a park at the end, and it gets high use, in addition to the fire station. When a change is proposed for an area, please use variance tools like conditional use permit processes to communicate with neighbors. Make sure people are notified and heard. This is a significant change. Skilled nursing facility to residents is a big difference, including parking for the residents in that new housing. Green space to parking lot means changes in water runoff, heat absorption, etc. And how will future changes to the facility be addressed? Clear communications with neighbors is so important. It can improve a project and it will help it be accepted more easily. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list, we have Kelly Love.
Good evening. Thank you so much for your time and being here.
I'm sorry, would you please state your name and address for the record?
Yep, Kelly Love, and I'm at 3214 North Sycamore Drive. So I live directly across from the parcel that is being discussed tonight, and I've read the appeal and also the appeal response. In living directly across from this facility, I would consider myself a key neighborhood stakeholder. And in the applicant's appeal response on community outreach, I was surprised to hear any was done, as the first I ever heard about this was with the, about these plans was with the postcard from the city on the 10-day notice to appeal. And I think everybody's talked enough about the parking, but I will emphasize my concern as well. I've seen the facility in full operation. I've been in my home for 14 years and have seen and experienced the parking issues that do take place. People park where there's no parking signs stating obviously stating no parking. And with the street parking, the street becomes challenging to navigate and creates extra hazards for the pedestrians. So I mean, I'm just thinking it through of 53 units and 19 parking spaces. And those 53 units could have double occupancy. And the street parking just, I think it's obvious that could become an issue. Making it, again, I just really am concerned about the dangers for the pedestrians because like everybody said, it's a very high use biking, walking, running street. And then also one of the issues noted from the prior use was with celebrations. There's going to be common areas for people to come celebrate. And so when all these people do show up to celebrate or, you know, have get-togethers with the tenants, it's going to cause more issues. And just, you know, those 19 parking spaces just really does not seem enough to me. So please just reconsider the parking. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Elaine Garris. Would you please state your name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Elaine Garris, and I live at 3315 North Sycamore Drive in Boise. I appreciate your listening to tonight. My emphasis is that I really urge this would be so much better for the neighborhood and the ongoing relationship between this very much needed affordable housing and the rest of the neighborhood if there were more of a process to include the neighbors. I live 2 houses north of the facility on Sycamore on the west side. I didn't receive anything until I got the information about the appeal. Perhaps if it was a CUP, we would have had more communication. I don't need to beat the dead horse of the parking, but it is an issue, and I really urge some kind of variance so that that parking lot that has always been used by this facility continue to be used as parking. That's really about all I have to say, but I appreciate your time, and I urge you to consider moving this to a CUP. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else present that would like to testify? Anyone online?
Mr. Chairman, we do have a few folks online. Oh, yep, there we have a hand. Douglas Drinka.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yes. Would you please state your name and address for the record, please?
It's Douglas Drinka, 3808 North Hawthorne Drive. So I wanted to just quickly note that the appellant has said that the use of the property for emergency COVID relief requires a future use to go through the CUP process. Let's just assume for a moment that this is true. We should consider the aim behind that new code section in the modern zoning code. That section was added late in the drafting process as a response to concerns that the new code would allow development of high density market rate housing by demolishing existing uses that provide affordable housing or housing for vulnerable populations. For instance, this property, this area would allow a 4-story huge multifamily property by right with no CUP process whatsoever. So the reason for that restriction of requiring the CUP process was to avoid something like that popping up while demolishing an existing piece of property that was beneficial for disadvantaged population. The Sycamore Commons project, on the other hand, proposes to offer affordable housing for vulnerable populations, continuing the site's legacy. The new code wasn't intended to prevent the development of affordable housing, and the Sycamore Commons project is a perfect example of how the new code can be used to promote affordable housing development, including through the reuse of existing structures. I think that as I followed along with the zoning code rewrite, I saw all of the work that was put in to make projects like this possible. And one of the components of that was this administrative approvals process. Administrative approvals provide consistency and predictability, which mean less risk for organizations like LEAP who are working to build affordable housing. Less risk means lower costs to launch a project, which means more projects and lower costs for residents of the completed projects. To see the outcomes the new code envisions, this board needs to follow the guidelines set in the new code and not allow projects to be derailed by a few individuals. Some of my neighbors have worried about parking and green space, but the modern zoning code balances those rules with the urgent need for more housing. Those neighbors with those concerns will need to focus their efforts on lobbying for a new zoning code if they don't like this one. For now, this is the one we've got, and we should follow it to the letter. That means denying this appeal and allowing the project to move forward. Thank you.
Josh, do we have any other online?
Mr. Chairman, we do have two more people online, but I don't see any hands raised.
If you are online and would like to speak, please raise your hand virtually. All right. Next phase of this process would be an applicant rebuttal. Would the applicant care to rebut?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I walked all this way to say no. No, I appreciate again the time that this body has spent on hearing the appeal and considering our side of the application. We continue to support staff's analysis and that the process has been followed faithfully and accurately to the logical conclusion. LEAP is looking forward to converting this defunct building into a new vibrant community for seniors in the neighborhood. They're a long-term neighbor. Houses are bought and sold every day, but this property is going to be held for a long time and continue to provide benefit to the neighborhood well into the future. So we thank you for the opportunity to do that.
Finally, time for the appellant rebuttal.
I wasn't expecting to have an opportunity for rebuttal, but I would just like to say that all along and through our communication, we are not fully against LEAP Housing making this space be something that can be a part of the community. We just feel that the conditional use permit and the lengthy reasons I gave this evening would really provide us the structured opportunity. We are individuals from the neighborhood. We aren't developers. We are coming, I would say, as the underdogs in this situation, and would just like the opportunity to have that structured process to give our feedback and have a more thorough analysis.
Sorry, just one more thing to note. I'm also the appellant. I'm on the form, so I'll take some of this rebuttal time. I want to talk about the 3-year statement. It's 3-year principal use. It is obvious that the approved use of that site was for a nursing home. It remained operational as a nursing home. We showed you the article. Their argument was that because it wasn't legal for them to be operating it as a nursing home, it doesn't apply. So that doesn't pass, that doesn't sit well with me. So since one law was broken, now we can break the next law and the next law after that. That doesn't make sense to me. That argument just, I don't see how anyone can make that argument. Additionally to that, just restate, the approved use in the city is for a nursing home. There's no other use for the last, I think the first nursing facility opened over 100 years ago there. There's been no other use. This is a huge change. There is in the zoning law, they wrote this case in, nursing home to multifamily, recognizing how big of an impact to a community that has. And that impact has been well addressed by my wife and a lot of the community concerned about the conversion of green space, not in line with the Sycamore plan, and the parking concerns. This is obvious that the correct process has not been followed to date, and the quicker we reverse that, the better off we'll be as a community.
Thank you. That brings to close the public portion of this item. I'm going to open it up to commissioner discussion. No one wants to fall on that sword?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Semple.
Yeah, I mean, I know I brought up parking a little bit earlier. I'm bringing it up again, mostly because the Design Review Commission doesn't have purview over parking decisions. The staff has evaluated it. They've met the threshold based on their application for a reduction of parking on site. The use and the process is established in code. That's with a minor design review process. It goes to staff only. It allows for an appeal to us. It allows, I think, for another appeal to maybe city council or something like that afterwards. And they've met all the technical aspects of a minor design review application process. It does not require notification of neighbors other than when the application is approved. That is in the code process for minor design review. We can't reset that and make this go back to a different process. That decision is above our purview, basically. There's obviously some passion here in the neighborhood about this project. I know LEAP Charities also, through just some projects I've seen going around our community. I know they do a really great job on their projects. I have no doubt that they followed what the city has directed them to do with their applications and their process. So, to me, it looks like they've addressed everything. In terms of an adaptive reuse, I believe that the threshold is if the exterior of the building remains architecturally sound and intact, and there's interior renovations, it's an adaptive reuse of an existing structure. And I believe that's the kind of the guidelines that the city is following when they are looking at this to evaluate it as an adaptive reuse project. That's kind of I don't have much else to add to it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just one quick correction. This appeal was submitted after a recent zoning code amendment, and administrative appeals of design review decisions, the final decision is that the Design Review Commission is not appealable to City Council.
Thank you, Josh.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Aguilar.
I have a question for Josh. I guess why is this item at design review and not at P&Z?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Aguilar, with the modern zoning code, a lot of uses transitioned from requiring planning and zoning commission approval to only requiring design review approval. And adaptive reuse such as this, where there are site improvements, the streetscape, the new parking lot, things are taking place on the site, which certainly falls under design review purview. The Planning and Zoning Commission review portion was removed with the modern zoning code, so there is no aspect. So the only required application was a design review minor because the building was existing, was not being expanded by more than 50%.
Josh, to get at the use question, the prior conditionally approved skilled nursing facility operated until 2021. And the COVID assistant, what was that facility and how was it licensed? And obviously during COVID-19, we had a lot of different municipalities all over the world doing everything they could to save people's lives. I don't know how that particular iteration of this facility was operating.
Mr. Chairman, the information we have is what's in your packet. We have these statements from the applicant about when that nursing facility use ceased, and I think we have evidence of that with the revocation of the license from the state. The newspaper article references for use as with COVID patients. That is not specifically encapsulated by the definition of a convalescent home or a nursing home in our code. So we would consider that likely a medical clinic use. The building could have been used for any number of uses in that time period that aren't captured under that nursing home or convalescent use, and we wouldn't have record of that.
So under the explicit definition of a convalescent skilled nursing facility, it ceased operating in 2021.
That's correct.
Even under a creative definition, it ceased operating in 22.
I think you can state that, yes.
We are now in 2025 and it is 3 years later. I'm sure that that timeline is tied to a design review application, but at the very worst, it would be tied to a building permit application, which they've not applied for yet, and which they'll probably take a few more weeks to apply for anyway. I'm just don't see a situation where even if we were to be talking about uses, which is not necessarily our authority, we're pretty much outside the 3-year window anyway. It's been well established that we don't talk about parking. Parking is a metric that is defined by the code. The process to get a reduction and the conditions under which those reductions are allowed are also explicitly defined in the code. I'm sure that there will be further iterations to the site plan, but the parking lot itself will be held for the offsets required. I would note with a little disappointment that as a design review body, we're not really talking too much about design right now. And I think that it's probably time for a motion. Keeping in mind that allowing the application to move forward would involve a motion for denial of the appeal.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Semple.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this has to do with kind of city process that we don't control. It involves metrics within our code that we have no purview over as well. And after considering all staff presentations and public testimony, I would move to deny the appeal of DRH 25-00054.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? In that case, I would just emphasize that I think that this is an exciting project. We are so strapped for housing, and the idea of demolishing some of this building so that we could make more parking seems like making living space for the wrong things in our community, like cars. I think it's much more important that we put houses here, and I think it's also worth noting that significantly more density is allowed by right in this site, and there's really nothing stopping the applicant from scraping this building and putting about quadruple this number of units here. None of that is to say that people need to be happy about this, and if the process is something that is very flawed in this case or in any case, and in your opinion, that's something to take up with your city council member, because the zoning code is constantly under evaluation and revision, and the application or the process itself is a major component of that code. I believe you guys are all under Jimmy Halliburton, just to, so you know. With that, I would call the roll.
Semple,
Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Erstad,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Gesrick,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
And finally, we have item number 4, DRH 25-00102, at 3635 West Elder Street. Construct a new 4-story, 176-unit hotel building and associated site improvements on property in an MX1/DA zone.
Mr. Chair,
Take it
would you
away.
request a presentation? I know there was a member of the public that had questions.
Is a presentation, well,
A brief
I'm not
overview?
quite sure what the questions are about. So if you could start with a high level, and if we need to, we can come back to you.
Okay. Good evening. This is DRH 25-00102, located at 3635 West Alder Street. The project is located north of I-84. The area is comprised of detached single-family homes to the north and west, with office and hotels adjacent to the east along Elder Street. This parcel has been previously approved for a 4-lot subdivision, construction of a new public road that connects Elder Street and St. Andrews Street with a conditional use permit to develop 2 hotels with a modification to a development agreement. So this project is the development of a hotel on the southernmost portion of the site. This is a 176 room hotel with 179 parking spaces. Just to note, the northern parking area shown on this slide is not part of this application. The hotel would be located in an area with similar hotel developments. Here are a couple of renderings of the street-facing facades, meeting all height requirements per the development agreement. And the applicant has demonstrated that there will be an appropriate mix of materials with some masonry on the base and ephes mid to the top section with some changing colors and patterns to provide design interest. With that, planning recommends approval. I'll stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Do we have any questions for staff? Seeing none, I'd invite the applicant to present if they'd like. If
Good
you'd
evening,
state
Mr.
your
Chair.
name and address for the record, and knowing that you've had some significant discussions with your neighbor, you could, if you feel like it, you can tailor your presentation to addressing those.
Yeah, my name is Sid Parekh with Parekh Architects. My address is 18218 East Morgan's Bend Drive, Houston, Texas, 77433. And I'm here to answer any questions that you have on the design of the building. I have these, I can share these with you, and I also brought some samples that I can share with you.
Go for it. Thank you.
Like,
I believe these are all in the record as well.
Yeah. I also got the show release was sending the color samples for all the color using this project. So that we can and like the mentioned, it's a 176 rooms hotel. And we worked with the city for the last year and a half on the height restrictions and also the finish restrictions. We have 48% ephes on the facing Elder Street. 50% is the max allowed. So then we changed a lot of the ephes to aluminum panels and masonry. So I think we are in, and there are other conditions for the site design that the civil engineer has confirmed that we are okay with agreeing to those. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer for the building.
Seeing none.
Fantastic. That's it.
Thank you. All right. Now open it to public testimony. Steve Gruthus? Grothaus? Yes. Can you give your name and address just prior to that?
I'm Steve Grothaus. I live at 3711 St. Andrew Street, Boise. I'm that corner property that's got the corner knocked off in front of the hotel. Probably one of the biggest things I would like to reiterate is the fact that people don't get notices from Ada County. They don't get notices from Boise City. Ada County passed their conditional use or whatever through a staff level decision. We didn't hear anything about the fact that there was a 10-day rebuttal time. Same way with Boise City on a couple of their meetings. And it's like echoing what everybody else has said here tonight. Nobody is notifying us of situations. Some of that stuff in the back there is just questions, but as you can see on that paper, that's where they posted the sign about this meeting. That's why you don't see anybody here tonight. They posted it in front of my truck about 2 foot away from the front bumper. Nobody knew it was there until I moved it a few days later. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Nobody gets notifications of these proceedings. And it needs to stop. Before this project even started on the east end, there was supposed to be a meeting we heard about. We went down there and looked. There was a piece of old plywood laying in the dirt with the notification stapled to it. They're not putting signs up. They're not letting people know, so we can't come down here and if we have object to it. Okay? Just please pass the word. We need to know what's going on in our neighborhoods. Other than that, I talked to these two gentlemen here. Pretty nice guys. Easy to work with. My probably major concern is the fact that this hotel sits 30 feet off my fence line. Okay. That's a 4-story building. That close to your, right, that close to my house. Okay. On my side of the property line, I have a 15-foot easement for utility access. I'm sure they've got one on their side too. It's going to be 15 feet. They're going to have a berm there to catch their water or a retaining wall because I don't want the water running off the berm running down in under my shop and in the winter cracking the floor. Okay, that's survival in my shop. It's just so close. And that particular piece of the property is probably the lowest property or point in that entire piece of property that's that they're going to build their hotel on. So it's going to have to come up. Okay, I'd need a retaining wall or something there just to keep the water out of my backyard. So, but like I said, I had a discussion with these guys out here in front before the meeting started. They seemed pretty decent about things. I hope we can work together. It's just how close it is to my back fence. And with the closeness there and the future, what it looks like, I've seen drawings and stuff where they're going to widen St. Andrews or widen Elder into St. Andrews and try to use it as an access for hotels, possibly apartments like somebody was talking about. If that happens, we won't have any parking in front of our house. I'll have 10 feet from my front door to where their easement ends. Okay, it's just, and I know that's not what we're talking about here tonight, but I'm being crowded and it's really frustrating. I've lived there for 45 years. I've raised my kids there. And all of a sudden I'm being squeezed into a little box. So like I said, talk to these guys. They seem pretty decent. I hope they can do something for us. Please make it so people know there's meetings. Do
Hey, Steve.
something for it.
We are over your time. We do have an opportunity for the applicant to rebut.
Yeah, there was,
I had a
One-
question real quick for the,
okay,
for,
go ahead.
is your property in Ada County, not in the city of
No,
Boise?
it's in City Boise,
It is in the city?
but
So,
Ada County turned St. Andrews Street over to the city of Boise. City of Boise, this is what we got. City of Boise turned it over to the other contractor with the other hotel to decide what to do with that road.
yeah, I guess my question was if you're within the city or not. Typically, the city mails out notifications to all affected neighbors
do
for public
This-
hearings.
The last
Uh,
meeting I went to, I asked their engineer, I says, how many notices you send out? He says, just what we needed to. And I said, well, how far down the road did you have to go? He said, 300 feet.
Mhm.
That's it.
Yeah, and that's the
Everybody on-
standard within code for public notification for a neighborhood meeting or for a public hearing.
So
But you should have got a postcard in the mail from the city regarding this public hearing.
day before yesterday.
Okay.
But I mean, the St. Andrews thing is going to affect everybody on that street. And if you look on that one page, it shows the other end of our subdivision is actually future airport property. So what's going on with our neighborhood? We don't have a clue. So, but anyways, that's all I've got to say. Other than the fact that can we take that piece of property with that address and put north and south, because I didn't know which meeting this was.
Sure.
I mean, put it in the records, there's property north, property south, so we know which meeting is, if we hit notification,
Sure.
okay?
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
That's about it. Thank you for your time.
Does the applicant have anything to add?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think we have our civil engineer online, Jordan. He can answer some questions regarding the water runoff that he mentioned. It is my understanding that the way it's been designed is the water will stay on the lot of the hotel. It will not be running off, but
That is our
Jordan can contribute more intelligently than me.
It's a state law.
the state law requires retention of all water on site. So
Yeah.
if staff says that you're following that, then I think that's enough for the commission to know.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, they'll be reviewed by Public Works, and it's part of the building permit review as well, that all drainage remains on site.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I can't. That concludes the public hearing portion. We'll open it up to discussion among the commission.
Everybody always looks down here at me. Mr. Chair.
Mr. Temple.
I do want to.
You're on a roll tonight.
I know. Well, this isn't the first time I've heard about some notification issues, so I think that there's definitely staff is looking into that, but making sure that neighbors get notified. There is different levels of notifications for different levels of application types, so sometimes it can be confusing why you don't get a notification for one project, but you might for another. If you want clarification on what that looks like, you could always call the planning staff, a PDS department down here. They can help walk you through that or get you to the website that kind of lays out who gets notified and when. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think, the drainage will, having, been in this realm for quite a while now in the city, the state of Idaho, city of Boise, everybody, ACHD, their water is not allowed to run off onto your property. So that'll be addressed through their design of the site as they get into building permits and grading permits. So you can rest assured that you won't have water entering your property, getting under your shop building. There will be no impacts, or you would have recourse. So, does anybody else have any other questions or comments? And if not, I'll make a motion to approve DRH 25-00102 with all the terms and conditions of the staff report and the conversation this evening.
Second.
You didn't want to give it to Amy? It's her last meeting.
Third.
All right, we have a motion, a second, any discussion? Seeing none, Christine, would you please call the roll?
Temple,
Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Erstad,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Gesrick,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, meeting's over. Go home. We are adjourned.